Hi, everyone. Welcome to the last talk for today with Danijela Sarovic. The topic is Innovate using data, what no one tells you, but you should know. Just to say a few words in advance about this topic. To innovate is to change, but changes can be intimidating and as such are often met with pushbacks and resistance. Why should we risk potential challenges if we can stay on our proven to work lane? Well, Daniela wants to challenge that, and she wants to explore the impediments and the hidden opportunities of innovation, how to leverage them across industries, and ultimately how to think 3 steps ahead, but still be able to take a step back in order to see the full data picture. I hope you will enjoy the lecture. As you've done already, feel free to ask questions during the lecture, and we will pick a few of them in order to answer in the Q&A session. Enjoy.
Hi, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. Let's talk about innovating using data and what no one tells you about that, but you should definitely know. So what comes to your mind when you hear data analyst? Tech savvy, good at math and science, but nerdy introverted geeks. Well, I'm no different. I'm not a public speaker or a seasoned lecturer, and most definitely this is not something I do every day or at all. Today, I'm entirely out of my comfort zone, but doing this will also allow me to share my expertise and knowledge with you. So I encourage all of you to step out of your comfort zone, make the leap into a space filled with potential and growth, and maybe learn something new along the way. My name is Danijela Sarovic. I am Big Data Director at a market research company called IC. And for the last 15 years, I was working mainly as a data analyst. I will tackle and uncover the hidden truths of using data to innovate. But first, what is innovation anyway? Maybe you think of Einstein's theory that changed how we understand time and space, or a handy little thing called smartphone that allowed us to put all tech devices in one, or even an app that changed the way we use transportation. And if these are so-called consequences of innovation, then what's not to love here? Innovation is definitely seen as something positive, as something that improves the way we live, we work, and function. So why is it so hard to do it then? I think that innovation is often true of like this: a straightforward road from point A to point B, a process that starts with an idea and ends with implementation, and everything between is smooth. Well, I found in reality it looks more like this: a wiggly, bumpy road. The initial ideas are often met with pushbacks, fear, and even resistance. And even when we reach a breakthrough, we encounter even more pushbacks. Why does it happen? So simply, people hate change, and people are filled with biases. Yes, these biases helped us survive this far, but they also make the process of innovation even more difficult sometimes. Humans have always been subject to cognitive biases, from the way we think to the way we act and behave in the world. But they're indeed a systematic cognitive error, a flawed way of thinking. Everyone can rationally agree that innovation is great. But these cognitive biases are the reason behind so many pushbacks. Cognitive biases are so many. I mean, even Wikipedia alone has a list of almost 200 cognitive biases, and they have existed probably since humankind itself. And even though they're faulty, We use them every day because they help us to process and interpret incoming information faster and make decisions without much effort, but also not without sacrificing precision and accuracy. This is where data comes in. We need data to overcome these biases. I mean, even our prehistoric ancestors relied on data. So what is it that no one tells you about innovation? First up, your job is to redefine expectations and not just to fulfill them. Imagine a Homo erectus rummaging through a forest, hunting for a food. Then all of a sudden, he hears leaves rustling around him. Sure, it can be a critter, but it can be also be a potential predator. And the data behind the cognitive decision at that moment can mean eat or get eaten. Faced with only limited data inputs, the Homo erectus had to decide whether it was danger or opportunity, which you can imagine was hard because he could only rely on the small data sets. But over time, these small data sets become larger and larger, and eventually evolved into a big data that we are talking about today. And the everyday human armed with new skills evolved into a detail-oriented problem solver that relies on the data, a Homo analyticus. For example, one such Homo analyticus is the founder of IC, Olivier. Dissatisfied with the century-old traditional practices of market research he encountered, Olivier had an aha moment and realized that there is no actually correlation between how we act as humans and as consumers, and the way that behavior is researched and measured. The truth is that the way we behave is influenced by some invisible, some subconscious and implicit process, and as such, cannot be measured with the same explicit methods that research companies have used for more than 120 years. So the guy went out to the streets of Belgium in hopes on finding some participants willing to try out a new behavioral method, that is eye tracking. Now, IC is one of the fastest growing research companies in the world because it specializes in combining behavioral methods such as eye tracking, facial coding, and virtual shopping with traditional service in order to better understand consumer behavior. This research model enables us to deliver results much faster and more cost-effectively, making IC more accessible to all different brands and companies. This completely redefined the industry, and clients would agree. And this is precisely why innovation is so cool. The idea behind using a unique approach, such as eye tracking, is that by the following positions and the movement of the eye, we can see what the consumers are, or rather are not looking at. The need to obtain reliable insights that mirror actual consumer behavior drove us to develop new technologies, like the aforementioned facial coding and virtual shopping, then apply to already existing problems. So to innovate is to be destructive and critical. It is a mindset and something that is happening all the time. And whenever there is innovation, there is more room for innovation. A few years ago, I moved from the corporate world to IC. And my only task in the beginning was to create a data warehouse by applying business intelligence principles into the market research industry. While fulfilling these expectations and tasks, I noticed that other aspects of my job needed improvements as well. I used my intuition to figure out what can and cannot be done. And from that, I was determined and passionate enough to redefine the expectations. The next step on this journey was to ask questions about everything and all I didn't understand, and then actively listen to the answers in order to recognize the business needs and potentials. I noticed that my teammates have started to value and recognize my ideas. But what's even better, they have also started to challenge them and give their own perspective and spin on it. And this is always great. Like the old saying goes, the more, the merrier. Exchanging knowledge, experience, and solutions helps team members understand your initial idea even better. Based on the inputs from the team and, of course, aligned with the business needs, I was able to modify and change my idea to its full potential. And it was clear to me that this is exactly where constructive communication is crucial. And maybe you will ask, what is the result of all of this? We developed 12 new internally used applications. But innovation does not have to mean new. You can tailor the already existing things and tools to your needs, and you can create your own road to innovation. What no one tells you, there is no innovation project. It's a way of approaching projects, a process. So actually, you can fix things that are not broken. Speaking about the tools we have developed, why fix something if it's not broken is something I often heard. But the truth is that methods, process, and simply the way of doing things can and should always be improved and optimized. Innovative ideas are everywhere, but it's up to us to make room for it. By listening to your colleagues, your co-workers from other teams, and by understanding their needs and wants, you will see that even the tiniest moving part of your company can be improved. However, when things are not broken, they are not a burning issue, and people have difficulty buying that idea. But even when things are not broken, they can be better. And it's up to us to see at what point will investment and improvement bring satisfying levels of added value to the company. So one of the first brainchildren my team and I created is a Queuebank, our own tool that took the traditional way of creating service to the next level. What used to be in Microsoft Word now became a much more optimized and quicker process. How does it work? It's essentially a library, a collection of most frequently asked questions, with, of course, the possibility of creating the new ones. The questions from this library can be easily browsed through and picked, and then drag and drop into a new survey. The survey is then exported in a perfectly formatted Word file, which is finally sent to the client. The questionnaire can be saved for a later use as a template for other research studies as well. Now, sounds great, right? But after initial resistance, it eventually was. But then I was met with even more pushback when we first developed our Stimulate description tool. We essentially created the metadata for tested items and set of attributes in order to better describe the tested stimuli and benchmark similar client products among themselves. And of course, this was first met with a lot of resistance. It was thought that Stimulate description tool was never actually going to be used by employees, and as such was never going to see the light of a day. People couldn't see the enormous benefits of this tool, and so they felt like it was just another boring uninspiring task they had to complete. But now, together with the Queuebank, Stimulate description tool is used in all of our research projects. So what's the point of me telling you this? As I mentioned, innovation is not a closed-off process and can be translated to other areas and even industries as well. I thought about how the logic behind these tools could be implemented, for example, in the retail industry. Please note that I have never worked in this field, but I believe that an approach like this could be applied here as well. Simply by tagging products based on a specific target group, you may conclude that maybe you need to list more products for vegans or vegetarians. This means that you can easily find the holes in your product range, the missed opportunities and needs you could be meeting, and thus explore new retail grounds. Another thing came to my mind is the telco industry. I have years of experience in the telco industry, so I'm quite familiar with it. But still, I have been difficulty with renewing my phone contract for the last 6 months. Now you're asking why. And the reason is very simple at the end. There are more than 10 tariffs and more than 50 phones at my disposal. This means that the number of combinations is endless. And so trying to choose the best option became very hard for me. How could you change this? Using the same logic that is behind the Stimulate description tool, I would create a personalized offer for the customers. Okay, imagine that you as a telco company can create 3 possible offers that I as a customer can choose from without much thinking or effort. By creating the metadata of tariffs and describing each tariff, you can see what is more important to me. Is it internet data or the number of minutes? Furthermore, the same thing can be done with phones. You will see whether I'm loyal to some maybe specific brand, or if I prefer phones with a high-end camera, or any other specifications. Combining data like this, you can create a dedicated, personalized offer to your clients. And the best of all is that not that you're just helping to your client, but you're also increasing their tenure with you and increasing your revenue. So both of these steps are something nobody asked for, nobody wanted to use, but now everybody wants to help improve. What was once met with resistance now has over 60 new crowdsourced optimization suggestions. My coworkers from all different teams literally chimed in and gave innovative ideas on how this tool can be even better, what is really so cool. So what no one tells you, it's not an isolated process. Innovation comes from translation. Your job is not done until you implement it. As I mentioned before, our road to innovation is a winding one, anything but easy and straightforward. Sometimes we are so deep in our numbers, codes, and backlogs, and so focused on what's in front of us that we forget to think about what we can do next. This is where it's important to take a step back in order to see the full picture, where we are at that moment, and more importantly, where we can go. I have developed a habit of constantly questioning and reminding myself to look at the entire company ecosystem and find where improvements could and should be made, even when the improvement is not something that is needed at that particular moment. I would argue that even in the very early stage of innovation, we have to think about what we are going to do next. And by doing this, we are building a more flexible and scalable system. We are bound to face bumps in the road, but when you take a step back, you will realize that you're actually on the right track. And you know what? After all pushbacks my team experienced, thinking through and implementing our ideas, this boosted efficiency by 40%, which is really huge. So what no one tells you is that the innovation will be unavoidably met with pushbacks. But remember always to keep the big picture in mind. So we are all here at this conference talking about innovation, talking about data and its potential, listening to all fantastic lecturers today. No doubt that we are open to and welcome change. But sometimes this is simply not enough. People from your organization might not like change at all. And this is a completely normal, but it's an avoidable growing pain of any process. So how do we push back the pushbacks, actually? It may seem philosophical, but in the end, it's quite simple. The first thing to remember is not to take those pushbacks personally. And when you manage to do so, you will find yourself more open to communication and active listening. Remember that nothing is set in stone and everything can be molded to specific needs. Yes, we all have our perspective and ways of thinking, but sometimes it's worth going to extra mile and trying to walk in someone else's shoes. Maybe there is a particular reason behind the resistance. Maybe they're afraid of losing their job. Maybe they're afraid that new technology might take their job. Be compassionate. Try and understand where they're coming from. And figure out how your ideas can complete and not compete with each other. Speaking about compassion, you also need a passion. Every job has at least 40% of the tasks that are uninspiring but needed to be done. I tackle these tasks first thing every day. And by doing so, I actually eat a metaphorical frog. So the rest of my day and the rest of my tasks are enjoyable, challenging, and motivating. And just like that, what every Homo analyticus sees as a challenge should actually be their superpower. So at the end, long story short, pack your ego and learn from everyone. So thank you for joining me on this journey.